Hi, I'm Daniel Mettler from Tusik Internet Solutions, and today I'd like to explain what Koi is and why we really need it for web design on .NET Nuke to go into the future. So it's all about creating harmony across CSS frameworks. And basically, I want you to understand the problems or the challenges that are facing us and why it's really easy to solve it this way. Now, if we go back to the beginning, everybody today is using Bootstrap 3. Most themes use Bootstrap 3. And some components use it as well. And there is already part of the problem. A lot of components will include another copy of Bootstrap 3 just to be sure that the component looks good. Or other component developers will actually avoid Bootstrap 3 because they're afraid that whatever they do clashes with the skin. Now, just looking at that, when somebody installs a new component, it typically already looks crappy right away. Why? Because the styles just don't match up with what the theme delivers or is expecting. Or it'll include multiple frameworks, which means the browser loads more data. It also uses more memory. It's slower, especially on mobile. And it's very nasty to debug presentation problems if something doesn't look as expected. And what also happens is people will typically maybe replace the skin, and that will end up forcing them to replace or upgrade other parts, including forms or whatever, simply because those parts don't expect a skin change. And this also forces all pages to have the same skin, or at least the same framework. So this is not very practical. But if we look into the future, things will get much harder. If we look at our way, whether it's Bootstrap 4, whether it's Foundation, or anything else, we know it's going to change soon. And we also know that after that change, it's going to change again. And if we look at a website's life cycle, basically, we would like to add a new component from time to time. And then much later, we might update the skin again to be something more modern. And these things should be out of sync. It shouldn't have to happen at the same time. But it does right now because the components don't adapt to whatever the skin has as a CSS framework. So I'm going to quickly show you an example of how the problem actually looks, because I've already prepared a page here. This is a Bootstrap 3 page, and it has components which present links side by side, something nicely centered, correctly colored, all this. This is done in Bootstrap 3. Now, if I just go into the DNN settings and switch it to Foundation, this is what I get. Completely different, it just blows up. So in other words, if somebody had a Foundation skin and had installed this component that doesn't react to the environment, things just look crappy. Now, if we go back and look at, this is what we just looked at, how Connect.Koi does this, it's pretty simple. The skin, the theme can communicate what it has, and the component can pick up on that and do whatever it wants. So let's do another brief demo. If we look at this page, this is now the same thing using Bootstrap 4, but without the information that it's using Bootstrap 4. So the component now cannot react to whatever is currently being used. It still looks nasty. But over here, we just added a config file, just a Koi JSON config file in the right folder, and bam, on Bootstrap 4. This is, by the way, a theme made by Jeff. On Bootstrap 4, it immediately looks right. And that's what we want, that experience that a person can install a component, it picks up what the skin is expecting or delivers, and just makes it look right. And so this is the very same component code like the Bootstrap 3 version, and it looks correct on both frameworks, and it could look correct on 10 frameworks. Just because the themes broadcast what they have or what they're using, and the component can pick up on that and do the right thing. So this is again what we just looked at. Basically, adding the config file has no side effects, so you can always add it. The skins do not need to include any new software because they don't really need the software. They're not adapting to anything. And themes can, of course, not have it, and components could also say, if nothing is broadcast, I'm just going to use whatever. I might even include Bootstrap 3 again. That's a strategy we're going to go for. If a theme doesn't communicate what it's using, we're going to include Bootstrap 3 again and show a warning to administrators that he should add this config file just to be safe. So anybody who makes a component today can just include the Connect.Koi. It's very easy. There's detailed instructions on how to do it. The question of how they want to build their templates, whether they want to make multiple versions or whether they want to have an inline syntax, that's what we prefer. It's completely up to him. He just receives the information, which framework is it, and he can adapt to that. Now, Koi has some additional helpers like Koi class, which I'll show you in a second. So that's pretty neat, but you could use anything else. You could even use resource files or whatever to have the different variations in it. So let's look at a little bit about the code. It's C# and it's ready for .NET Core, and it runs on DNN 7+, so even 7.0. So in other words, even if you have a theme or a component that is for DNN 7.0, you can already include Koi in it and use this. And it's MIT licensed and it's handed over to the DNN Connect Foundation. So what's done? The concept is done, version 1 is released, it's tested, it works, it even has automated testing code and things like that. There's a documentation site, the link is up there, connect.koi.net. There's instructions for the skin developers, basically to add the Koi JSON. There's instructions for the API if you would like to use that. Instructions for the component developers. So the next step is just that skins should start to include this file. Because it's really low threshold, it has no side effects. And once they include this, components can automatically look right if they're ready for it. What else do we need to know? That's about it. So let me just quickly show you one more little detail. This is just like the very simple syntax, how we like it. Anybody can have it differently, of course, but the way we do it, for example, is that like in this line here, instead of writing class is whatever, there's this little formula that says Bootstrap 3 will have this class, Bootstrap 4 will have that class. Not very useful at the moment since they're doing the same thing. This could also be written like this. Bootstrap 3 and 4 look like that. Or here's a more complicated pattern. All of the frameworks will have this class. Bootstrap 3 will have these classes here. And for example, in Bootstrap 3, we needed a JavaScript to sync the height of the boxes, which we don't need in Bootstrap 4. So in Bootstrap 4, these are the classes, and as you can see, it's missing that helper class, which the JavaScript would pick up. So this is just a very simple example. You can do it differently. The important thing is that Koi will tell you what framework it has. And you can also do things like this and say, to transport this information to the browser. And this will let the JavaScript also use this code to work with it. On the documentation website, you will also find a lot of things, including the vision, how it works, what you need to do, plus a list of standardized framework codes, because that's the key thing that we have to make sure that a skin will say it uses BS3, because then the component can look at the same code and say, okay, in case of BS3, I'm going to behave this way. So this is all ready and all production grade. Thank you for watching. This was Daniel Mettler, 2SIG Internet Solutions, DNN Connect, and presenting Connect.